preacher and the teacher here want to tell us, Lord, that we would today, Lord, avoid folly, Lord, and lean into wisdom. And I pray, God, that you would guard my words and thoughts, and that you would facilitate the discussion well, Lord, and that we would have a higher view of your word and be obedient to what we learn. In your name, amen. Well, before I get started, I need to do a retraction. Morgan Freeman is not 100. He's 89. And speaking of we're talking about folly today, and in the spirit of that, check your sources before you just take anything you see on the internet. And I'm like, wow, he's old. So apologies for that. I was corrected, and I'm happy to know that he is alive and well, because I need him to narrate all my voicemails. And on a totally aside, and it does tie into Ecclesiastes, there's a lot of people, from my childhood that are, and obviously all of our childhoods and upbringing that are getting really old. And it's just wow, you just don't, whether it's, we're not getting old, but it's just all these people. You see athletes, and you see an athlete that you maybe watched in the 90s, and you're like, holy smokes, he's getting old. Which ties in, to the book, so that was for free, but I just wanted to clear the air there. I didn't mean to age him by 11 years, my bad. But we are in Ecclesiastes 10 today, and I'm also tagging on verses 18 because I see it all kind of connected, and so we'll jump right into it. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, but we'll start in 9:18. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart inclines him to the right, and a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and says to everyone that he is a fool. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an air proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. If the iron is blunt, and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. But wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it's charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. The words of the wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and no one can tell him what will be after him. The toil of a fool wearies him, and he does not know the way to the city. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. Even in your thought do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter. This is the word of the Lord. All right, so we are jumping into, we're continuing a section. He started shifting away from a lot of the doom and gloom narrative that he had been characterized with. And last week we saw him start building this argument about wisdom being better than folly. And so I titled today's lesson, A Little Folly, just a little bit. Because I think what he's ultimately doing in this series of proverbs and stories and anecdotes and explanations is fleshing out what we see here in verses 18 and the beginning of chapter 10. Wisdom is better than weapons of war. I took that out so it would fit on the slide, but also just the main point, wisdom is better, but one sinner destroys much good. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. Okay, that's interesting. We'll get into that in a second. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. And I think when we go through the rest of chapter 10, because it's just looking at it, if you're looking at your English translation, there's quite a shift away from just the block text, and then we start seeing all these proverbs. It's like, hey, we're back into Proverbs. It was Solomon who wrote this. We're not going to get into that. No, it wasn't. But we see all these Proverbs and just kind of somewhat disconnected stains. Like, it really is tricky if you were to try to, print this out and draw lines and try to map it out. It is kind of tricky to put this into any sort of legible and consistent structure or formula, which I like doing because that's how preachers were taught, is there's always just one outline that you superimpose over the text, and everything just kind of has to wedge into that. 3 points in a poem and some application, that kind of a thing. But here it seems somewhat disconnected. He's kind of hopping all over the place. But as one commentator put it, they are united more in form and in topic. So we see similar topics, which we'll jump into here in a second. But we see several themes, and it's not a straight line. It's not that he talks about one and then talks about the other and continues down. It's that he kind of flows through this stream of consciousness where he is talking about folly and wisdom. And more specifically, how just a little bit of folly, a little bit of foolishness can override and ruin an otherwise really good thing, a really wise thing. And we can instantly think of applications, and we'll get to some of those applications. But how does a little folly spoil so much wisdom? Where do we see this folly? How do we interact with it? And so that's where we see these themes. We'll see themes like fools, folly, and foolishness, just kind of interchangeably. We'll see the wise and wisdom as topics. And then we'll see these two ways, which in wisdom literature is very common. You can look in Psalms 1 and 2, you can look in Proverbs 9. You see this idea, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, stands not in the way of sinners, all that. The way of the witch, we could go to Psalm 1, I guess. I was required to memorize that in my homeschool days, but apparently I can't have it on recall. But we just see, blessed is a man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, stands in the way of scoffers. His delight is in the law of the Lord. The wicked are not so. They are like the wind. The wicked will not stand in judgment. They will not stand in the congregation of the righteous. And then we see these pictures. There's two real options. Blessed is the man who doesn't hang around idiots and immerses himself in Scripture and doesn't let the foolishness of the world drag him down, or you can be like the wicked and the foolish. In Proverbs, you see Lady Wisdom and you see Madam Folly. And they're both, you kind of just see this picture in Proverbs 9. There's two roads. You can either walk down the road of wisdom, which leads to life, or you can walk down the road of folly, which leads to Sheol or death. So we see these two ways played out in this as well. I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds on that. These are just themes. And as we encounter these themes, again, in wisdom teaching, it's not necessarily saying in this specific situation, thou shalt always do X, Y, Z. It's in this particular situation, in this life circumstance, there is generally speaking, there is a wise way to navigate this scenario, which will lend itself to greater success than if you take the foolish route, which leads ultimately to destruction. You see a lot to do with talking in this section, and it's not a wild jump to think, hey, we're going to be talking a lot about foolishness and fools, and there's going to be a lot of topics on talking involved. But the words that come out of our mouths, and more accurately, the words that come out of our heart, reflect either a foolishness or a wisdom. It's very apparent. When someone's a fool, it's quite obvious. And when somebody's wise, it's also apparent. And so we'll get into that. And then there's also these sections where he talks about government. And again, the thesis statement that I'm going to leverage here is that a little folly outweighs wisdom. That is the sentence. Let's keep that at the fore, and then we're going to see in these examples that the preacher gives us, how does that happen? Where does that happen? How should we interact when that happens, etc.? So I give the outline here. If you're a note taker, we'll definitely jump into this. But verses 2 through 4, again, verse 1, we're just going to keep that at the top. A little folly outweighs wisdom. And then we talk about the ways or the path. There's this imagery of walking on a road. And the wise will walk one way to the right, the fool will walk to the left, and the fool will just broadcast and advertise that they are a fool. I titled this Folly at City Hall. There's 2 sections where he talks about government. And the second section, he talks about the king. And in this section, in verses 5 and 7, it's more just kind of generally speaking, folly is set in high places, the rich sit, where the low should be, and vice versa. So I titled that, at City Hall. So again, we're talking about how do we interact when folly invades our local administration, our local job, our school, our company. We can fill in the blank, and we'll look at that. And we'll look at folly at work. And I do need to, some of this I took from Alistair Begg's devotional, where he just sees folly, where's my notes? Folly in the streets, folly in high places, folly in the workplace, and folly in our words. So I stole a little bit of that from him. Want to give him credit. It's good devotional if you're looking for one. Folly in talking, we alluded to that already. Folly on Capitol Hill. So again, I'm translating that to an American westernized picture, but it's the king. If I said folly in the kingdom, it'd be like, that's a little abstract. We're in the 21st century. So Capitol Hill, and then we're going to finish it out with wise advice in a foolish world. But again, the thesis statement that we are taking from the preacher is one sinner destroys much good. So it just takes one thing, one person, one instance to ruin much good. But that at the end of the day, a little folly, just a little bit, can outweigh and overrule so much wisdom and honor, whether in an individual sense, in a corporate sense, in a life sense. So that's how we're going to take it before we jump in. Any initial thoughts? Cool. All right. I'm trying this out because it helps my notes, but I also just kind of want to see it as we go through the flow. But we'll go into section 1 when we talk about the ways. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart inclines him to the right, and a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everyone that he is a fool. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. So a little folly outweighs wisdom in the ways. And so just looking at this from a very high level, we have the wise and the fool. The wise man will go to the right and the fool's heart to the left. This is not a commentary on political leanings. This is just simply to say they go 2 different directions. Wisdom and folly cannot coexist on the same lane. So if you're on one, you're by default not on the other. And there's biblical imagery, the right hand is the arm of strength, and then the left hand gets a bad rap. So if you're a lefty, my son's a lefty. I don't think he's cursed of the Lord, but amen. All you southpaws, we feel for you. Every time we see you right, we are just enraptured. How does that work? But yeah, no, it's not a commentary on hey, Solomon was a Republican. No, it's not that at all. It's just there's 2 different directions. A wise man's heart will incline him to the right way. It will take him in the right general directions. A fool's heart to the left. And when a fool walks on the road, he lacks sense. He says to everyone that he is a fool. He just can't help himself. When you meet, and again, this is, we start with, we'll zoom out just a little. We'll start with the good intent in the garden. Sin happened, the fall happened, and now life is punctuated by foolishness, by a lack of wisdom, by all sorts of Hevel-like things, just enigma, frustrating things. And in that now we get, instead of being perfectly representative image bearers of God, we are fractured image bearers of God. And in that we are introduced to foolishness, to lack of wisdom, to stupidity, and etc. And so now we have foolishness. And foolishness is wrapped up in the heart of a child. It starts young, we recognize. But at the end of the day, like when we know this, we see in our world, we can even see in our own lives that when somebody is not smart, but they think that they're smart, or they're not wise and they think that they're wise, it just kind of advertises itself. We don't need to go to the news. What we could turn on any TV show, we could turn on any form of entertainment and kind of be in on that, where it's just obvious. They broadcast it. They just can't help it. When you are a fool, and again, this is not, oh, good, he's talking about somebody else. I'm glad he's talking to the person next to me and not me. No, when we have foolishness wrapped up in our own heart, it finds its way out. And it's kind of like when you eat too much garlic and the next day you're like, how do I smell that way? It's just what happens. It just oozes out at some point. So one quote that I thought was interesting: a fool can't walk down the street without bumbling. As we live and breathe, we broadcast what we are. If we are foolish, the folks see us coming. If we are wise, that competence is visible as well. So again, there are two ways, but folly, just a little folly. And again, the line between I am on the wise path, all it takes is one dumb decision. All it takes is one foolish moment, and then you're on the way of the fool. And you advertise that. I heard a sports commentator years ago say that one of the pieces of advice that he would always tell his high school kids is, be careful what car you get into. Like, you could be on this great trajectory in life, you have all this promise in front of you, but you make it with the wrong friends and you get into the wrong car, your life can go off on a completely separate trajectory. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. Fools will broadcast their foolishness at all times. And it's sad. Because we can see that in our own lives, we can see that in people, in our loved ones' lives, our families' lives, our friends, and you would like, man, I really wish they would just take this, whatever situation, their health, their mental health, their finances, their life, their choice of entertainment, their pastimes. I wish they could just rein those in and not make such foolish decisions. And we feel that angst sometime when we look abroad, but you just can't help it. If you're a fool, you're going to advertise that foolishness. And again, the line between being on the right way and the left way is, right hand, left hand. That's all it takes. One little bit of folly can outweigh a ton of wise decisions in your life. Wisdom will show discretion. Again, when we talk about passages here that are somewhat tricky to layer on each other, it's like, hey, I can get this. We're talking about roads and we're talking about perfume. I'm not going to spend too much on the perfume, by the way, because I think that makes sense. We understand that concept. If you are into perfume making, I don't recommend it as a pastime. One little deficiency, one little bit of bacteria, one fly that kind of swoops in, like when, if you have a nice drink, Amy has this way of when she makes a cup of coffee, she sits down in the morning. If there is a single fruit fly in the house, I don't know where it could be, it will find its way into her coffee. So she'll have the cup, she'll always have to put a napkin over it. I'm like, what are you doing? Now, I drink coffee, and I even put creamer in it so anything would stand out. Never had, maybe once. But yeah, no, one fly, and I'm like, just pull the fly out. And she goes, nope, the coffee's done. And I'm like, but coffee's expensive. But no, so it's that idea. So I think we just intuitively understand that. Like, it doesn't matter how old or young you are, what your context in life is. If you have your, blended coffee drink, and all of a sudden you see a spider in there, you're not going to be like, it's just one little thing, though. No, the whole thing's gone. But wise will show discretion. And this right here, I want to see if I can find the quote. I won't spend too much time on that. But this picture of wisdom, we have the fool that can't help but advertise its bumbling foolishness. And then you have this picture of a wise person, or this picture of a scenario when you're in a room with a superior. In this context, if the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place. And if you have been reading and following along with Ecclesiastes, it's like, wait a minute, didn't we say earlier to get out of there when the king's angry? He kind of goes back and forth on himself at times. But when the anger of the ruler rises against you, don't leave your place, don't be hasty, for calmness will lay gray offenses to rest. So again, we have this juxtaposition. A fool can't help but just talk all the time and advertise the foolishness. And then we get this proverb. And this proverb paints a picture of, you're in your boss's office and he is mad or she is mad. And flying off the handle, and you're ready to just, I'm separating myself. But maybe in this sense, maybe wisdom in this scenario, let's keep it cool and even. I'm not going to rush out the office. I'm not going to slam the door. I'm not going to go on Slack and blow the situation up to all my coworkers. I'm going to stay in this scenario, and maybe in this setting, my ability to keep my head on my shoulders and stay even will draw a calmness and resolve the issue. So that's kind of the picture. So we see this juxtaposition. Again, it's just a proverbial statement, and I think we've all been in this scenario, whether you're a child with a parent, a student with a professor, employee with a boss, citizen with the police, etc. It's always when you meet the fool or the angry individual on their level, it almost never goes well. So I think that's what he's drawing at there. But before we go on to the next section, any thoughts? Okay. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, as if it were an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in the low place. I have seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. So, a little folly outweighs wisdom. So verses 5 through 7, again, I titled this at City Hall, but again, it doesn't really define for us in our English translations what are these high places, but we can extrapolate this whether in the city context, county context, or employer context. And what does folly do when it enters the workplace and enters the government offices or the decision makers' offices? It leads to silly promotions that destroy teams and pervert leadership norms. Again, I don't think I'm saying anything that's like, that's not true. We've all, maybe, if you've been in the workplace long enough, have been in this situation where you're like, how did this person get in charge? How do we have the poor, in this example, again, Middle Eastern context, thousands of years ago, folly is set in high places. So the rich sit in a low place, and I have seen slaves on the horses. No, that's not where servants or slaves belong. Princes belong on the horses, and slaves are guiding the horses. But we see reversals. We see distortions and perversions of leadership norms and life norms when foolishness, just a little folly, can outweigh a lot of wisdom. So again, I don't think we need to stretch our imaginations too far to think of scenarios where, whether we are, we're on a team, somebody, the top performer in a production line always seems to get the leadership role, and it's like somehow their ability to make widgets equates to being able to be people managers, and then that happens and it gets really clunky and frustrating. So like, again, if you haven't been in that world, just work long enough, I'm sure it'll happen. Or in government. Hey, we have a solid school board, we have a solid city council. We're going to pick this one individual with a shady reputation or poor decision making, some awkward social media posts maybe in the past, and they're going to get into these leadership roles, and then before you know it, it's just distorted and things are backwards. So again, it's not saying this always happens. This is going to happen every time. Sometimes you give the promotion to the clown, the class clown, and he rises to the occasion. And it turns out that, hey, he's just kind of funny, but he's actually a good employee. Sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. But again, a little folly, one bad decision. I need to promote somebody. I need to pick somebody for this project. I need to pick somebody to run this church organization event. I need to pick a class president. What could go wrong? Bob looks like a nice guy. Well, Bob can't, navigate himself out of a wet paper bag, but he's nice. He's got a nice personality. Let's just put Bob in charge, and then everything kind of crumbles. We understand this. So again, folly in this setting, just a little bit. It could just be one decision, one promotion, one call that we made as a committee, and then the whole thing, just months of churn to get it fixed. In an Amazon context, you promote one person, and they shouldn't have been in that role. It could be years before you either coach them up or coach them out, kind of a thing. And again, you're like, well, why is John talking like he's on a TED Talk right now? No, it's just this is the preacher. This is looking and surveying at the scenarios of life and saying there's two general ways that wisdom benefits and foolishness degrades. And so, shorter section there. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? Again, this is not the content in the Bible where it's like we are meant to just receive something and say, okay, I'm either going to do it or not do it. Like wisdom invites itself. You turn it over in your head. You chew on it. You think about it. And then before you know it, you're going through the context of life and you're like, hey, I see that. So that thing that I read in Ecclesiastes or Proverbs, I see that in that scenario. Like that's how we get stories in Proverbs of consider the ant. Let's talk about vines for a while or birds. And it's the wise person keeps their head on their shoulder and observes life through this framework of wisdom. But a little bit of folly can mess up a lot of that. Folly at the workplace. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. If the iron is blunt, one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. But wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it's charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. This one's always fun. But as Begg, I'm on the wrong slide. There we go. As Begg put it, folly at the workplace. But I would say, again, we need to look at folly as more than just a poor decision by a singular human being or a collective of human beings. But folly is part of our ethos now as from the fall. So it's bound up in our hearts. We can see it play out everywhere. But what does folly at work look like? I kind of tried to break this down. Again, it's not the easiest to diagram, but you have incidental folly. So again, this is just the haphazard, this is just the way life is. Sometimes you're doing your job, sometimes you're going through life, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, you're a parent, you're an employee, you're a student, you're a retiree, whatever the case might be, and stuff just happens. So you dig a pit, and you fall into it. You're just doing your job. And there's all sorts. This section invites so much commentary on should we spiritualize and allegorize what it is to dig a pit. And I think you could go either direction, but on a plain reading, these are the normal day-to-day activities that an average, Israeli, middle-class dude would probably run himself into at times. Hey, I gotta dig a hole, dig a new well, and this well will benefit my family, it'll benefit the neighborhood, and then I fall into it and get hurt. So you have these incidental examples of folly where just stuff happens in a foolish world and in a fallen world. And again, this is just the way my brain works. You could have the most amazing safety record at your job. Like that little poster, how many days since last injury. And you've run off the list it's been years. Perfect safety record. This is wonderful. And all it takes is one knucklehead, one loose bolt on a shelf, and then there goes your safety metrics for the year. Bummer. I let the family, we were doing so well financially, and I was like, maybe I should invest in that Ponzi scheme. Let's do it. What could possibly go wrong? And it's just like, man. But it's just this, stuff happens. Investing in the typewriter just as the computer gets developed. It's just stuff happens in life, and it's incidental. It's not necessarily your fault. You may not have actually done anything wrong. You're just digging a hole. You're just putting some drywall up on the wall, and there's a snake in the wall, and it bites you. So we just see these examples. And I'll go back to this, and it breaks itself out quite not semantically, evenly. You quarry stones, you're hurt by them, you fall into a pit, you dig a hole, you cut logs, and the tree can come back on you. If Addison was here, I'm sure he could give us a stricter definition of how that works. But again, you're just doing your job. And then we get this little line at the end of verse 10. Wisdom helps one to succeed, and it's sandwiched between, if the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. And if a serpent bites before it's charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. And this, I'll admit, whenever I've read this section and passage, I'm like, snake charming? Okay. Aren't we not supposed to do that? Isn't that like voodoo or something? But wisdom helps one to succeed. When we see this statement, and it's I cannot speak English. Yes, that word. I'm sorry, y'all. I like big words, but for whatever reason, my brain it's not coming out right. But it's sandwiched between these examples of somebody cutting a log and not doing the proper due diligence to sharpen the blade, and then they make life harder. And so this is what wisdom would look at any situation and strategically map out and say, I need to do this task. How about I do the legwork to set myself up for success so that, instead of having to sharpen my blade every hour, I spend some quality time into it and I can just go to town on the trees. And again, I think there's Aesop's fables and things like that kind of break this down. But we understand that. Like common sense wisdom will look at a situation and look for the ways where it can be more efficient, where it can be more consistent, more safe, whatever. And then you have this intentional folly. And the picture that we see here is like you have two guys that are cutting logs, and one is just going to grab it and do it. You know what? I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to go to town and start cutting. And it makes the work so much harder and so much more mundane and challenging than it needs to be. And again, we're looking at folly, a little folly. So again, you could be a great employee. You could be a great student. You could be whatever scenario you're in. And then you get to these tasks and you're just like, I'm going to make life harder for myself with these foolish decisions, with these foolish choices. Or, sometimes silly stuff happens and it just happens and I can't help it and I just have to work around it. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of times I do things in my life that are done that just make life harder. Like if I would just take a little extra time in a discussion with a coworker or a spouse or a family member, if I would just take a little time to cool the jets and think about what I want to say and then say it versus just spouting off and just talking, I could reduce so much headache and stress, so much churn, whether in a work environment or in a relationship environment. But we have these just pictures. The picture of a snake charmer takes time and patience and deliberation to charm a snake. And if you just fools rush in kind of a mindset, the snake's going to react, it's going to bite you, and the whole point of charming the snake is lost. And by that point too, with a snake, you have the imagery of poison and damage. Now you run into the situation of you might have entered a scenario of irreversible harm. So it's, again, these are ancient examples. I don't know the last time I've ever seen a snake being charmed. I have no desire to ever see that. I'm not a snake person. But it's just that idea. And again, it shouldn't take too much imagination, but we're encouraged to use our imagination, look at life and say, man, what are those things, whether in my walk with the Lord, whether in my interactions with other human beings, with my kids, with my job, with life, that tiny bits of folly and foolishness, for whatever reason, for whatever source that comes, makes life so much harder. It's so much harder to do the right thing when I'm making these foolish cumulative decisions to sin, in small little, tiny ways. Oh, it's no big deal, just a little fly in that ointment, no big deal. And then it's like, man, I make my life so much harder. If I could just, get out of, you ever thought, like, if I could just get out of my own way, we could, life wouldn't be so terrible. I am my own, and we have expressions like this in pop culture. You're like, you're your own worst enemy. Things of these expressions. And I think this is what we're invited to chew on. And again, it's like I heard a preacher this week on a different passage, but he talks about how the Bible's like a diamond that you just keep turning over and over and over, and you see it from different angles, and you see the light cutting through, and you see new things. And it's just, with these examples, we're just invited to turn it over and think through it and let it inform our life and words. Which, speaking of which, segue, the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the works of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words. Oh, I lost my spot. Though no man knows what it is to be, and who can tell him what will be after? The toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. Folly and talking. Pretty straightforward in this section. Wise words win favor. A wise man's word win him favor. But the lips of a fool will consume him or her. And again, if you're a child, you have children, you're a student, you're an employee, it doesn't matter. Chances are most issues that start in life somewhere probably boil down to a conversation that just stop talking. You're getting yourself in so much trouble. You ever see Cops? I don't think we watch the show anymore, but when I was a kid, the old school Fox Cops, Bad Boys, that one. How many of those scenarios would have just never happened if the dude didn't talk? Just listen. But it's like, that's what fools do. Like when Connor comes up and he's like, Dad, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. No, you're not. Yes, I am. And I'm like, dude, stop talking. You keep talking, you're going to dig yourself a pit that you can't get out of. Hey, call back to verse 8. But it's those types of things. Starts stupid, starts foolish, and ends in insanity, madness. Again, we know this intuitively. We've either been this person. How many times at work have I gotten myself into an awkward conversation that I've later had to go back and kind of resolve because I just wouldn't shut up? John, you're not winning this argument. No, I'm going to die on this hill. No, John, just stop talking. Put him on mute. Kick him off the call before we end in HR. This is stupid. But I've been that person. I think you might know people that have been that person too. And again, more words equals wisdom to a fool. You talk to these people, and sometimes it's yourself that you're talking to, and it's like, because I'm using these long, flowy sentences, and I'm using all of these words, I'm smart. This must mean I'm wise. No, and again, quantity over quality, but we know this person. We've seen this person on the news. We've seen this person on debate stages and, talking head sports shows and all of these things where it's just, you don't know what you're talking about. You just don't. But man, when we get on a hill we want to die on for good or for ill, we'll just talk our way into oblivion. I was going to say, it's like marriage conversations is probably where I feel this the most. Just let it go. Just walk away. Take a breath. No, I'm right. I am going to, we're doing this. Man, it's for whatever reason, it's never worked for me. And Amy and I have never been at the end of it and going, yeah, that was the good call. I'm glad that 5-minute conversation turned into a 3-hour conversation. Nobody can remember what was said between minutes 1 and 300. But now at the end of it, here we are, more words. Did it help us? And again, I don't think I'm saying anything that is scandalous or that is unrelatable in our own lives, whether it's with our kids, our spouse, our employer, authority figures, whatnot. Simplest things go wrong. Again, the lips of the fool. That picture of they can't even find the city, because that's such a weird statement to throw in the middle of that. The toil of a fool wearies him. Toil links back to talking. He does not know the way to the city. He's probably in the city. He's probably right outside the city. How do you not get to the city when it's just right there in front of you? The simplest tasks just get convoluted and messed up. And it's again, there's lots of different, extrapolations that commentators and smarter people than me try to make of this, but at the end of the day, we just can't, even the simple things we get wrong. finding the way to the city. Like, even in Denver or where we live, it's like, I need to get to Denver. It's pretty obvious, go to the tall buildings. Walk towards the mountains, you'll run into something at some point. But even the fool, in all their talking and all their bluster, can't even, and they think they're so smart. They think they can predict the future. I mean, that's what no one knows what is to be and who can tell him what will be after. Have you ever met this guy? I've met this guy on the internet, usually when I'm playing video games that, understand that, aliens are real and the pyramids were built by giants, and he is the smartest guy in the room, and then you're like, you are so silly. Like tinfoil hat guy. Just that kind of personality that, dude, you're so smart because you're the only person you listen to. But I think it's that kind of a picture. But we've talked to that guy. Oh, I know what's going to happen. If you do this, this will happen. You're wrong and I'm right, and here are the reasons. And it's just like, you just look at this and go, you're so silly. Just stop talking. And sometimes we're in that person's shoes. And other times we live in this world, and isn't it so frustrating to be in a conversation where it's like, does this guy or gal have a clue of what they're talking about? In any scenario, whether it's politics, church, life, money, whatever. I usually feel that way whenever somebody tries to tell me LeBron's better than Jordan. No, he's not. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobility. Your princes eat at the right time. They do it for the right reasons. They're doing it for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. So now we take it, we're not just talking about rulers in high places, we're talking about the king. In our context, that's why I said Capitol Hill, but this is not a political commentary, so if you're like, John's about to go down some dangerous roads, I'm not going there. It's just our understanding and context. If we were in Britain, I would say Buckingham Palace. That's all. So it's not a commentary on one v the other. It's just to say, if you are a land where your king is a child, acts like a child, he plays and eats at the wrong times. Again, if you're feasting in the morning when you should probably be down at the office hashing out policy, that land is in a tough spot. Man, it's rough when our leaders are children. And it leads to sloth. That idea of the roof caving in, the base, the infrastructure of your house caving in because your leaders are doing the wrong things at the wrong times. Compare it against the land that's happy. These rulers understand the weight of their role. They are of the nobility, and they know what it comes with that decorum. They play and eat at the appropriate time. It's not wrong to have food. Bread is good. Wine is good. Money, in its right context, is good. But it's at the right time and hopefully for the right reasons. And again, I'm not going to go political, but just in history, it's easy to see. When you have leaders that fall into this category, man, it's frustrating. And then when you have leaders that fall into this category, it's nice. Hey, battery died. Testing. No, it didn't. Now I'm back. So I'm not going to move. Maybe Jerome was just like, we are almost done. I can talk loud. It just won't work for the stream. I can't find the back.
Yeah, I got you.
Testing. All right, we'll finish on this. Last thought that I want to jump to. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, and some winged creature will tell the matter. This one's fairly straightforward, and I would love to spend more time kind of hashing this out. But at the end of the day, what's being talked about in this section, as we've talked about already, a little folly outweighing much wisdom. We are sometimes the fool. We are sometimes in the context where we have to endure the fool. If we're in a government system or a land system where our rulers are immature, making poor decisions, feasting at the wrong times, you're at work and just stupid things happen, whether on purpose or intentionally or unintentionally, how do we respond to this? And there's many ways that the Bible in its cumulative nature gives us. But one way that the preacher picks on, and I think it's very apropos to our culture, is, man, don't we love to trash the people around us that we don't agree with, that we're frustrated by, and we talk too much. And we think we're in private. And again, he could have taken this a million different directions, but he took it, the preacher here, do not curse the king in your bedroom. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's where you should be, it's private. Whoever's in the bedroom with you or you're in there by yourself, like there's a certain understanding of trust and security that you have. So you can say whatever you want. But no, don't even do it in your bedroom. Don't do it in your thoughts, because a winged bird will carry it. What does this mean real quick? Be quiet. When you're in a frustrating moment and you're encountering the folly of the world, just use some wisdom and maybe be careful how much you talk about it, complain about it, get frustrated about it. And be careful who you vent to. That's kind of for free there. But man, it's frustrating in this world sometimes. And whether it's a decision at the church, whether it's a decision at Capitol Hill, whether it's a decision at your job, a wise man or woman will slow it down, will keep calm in those tense situations, and hopefully stay on the path to wisdom. Or you're going to just say whatever comes to your mind. You're going to go on Slack, you're going to go on email, you're going to go on Facebook or Twitter, and you're just going to let the world know how much you don't like about XYZ. And at the end of the day, have we ever looked at those individuals, and have you ever been that individual and been edified by that experience? Has it ever like, man, I just went and roasted Governor Polis on Twitter, and is he going to care? Probably not. Is he going to find out about it? Probably not. But did it advance the cause of the gospel? Did it do anything positive? Open for interpretation. Wisdom uses discretion when it relates to living in a woeful land with fools as leaders, where frivolous speech and wanton excess dominate the lives of those who should be working for the good. And we are at time. I'm just going to leave this quote up. I won't read it in its entirety. But one of the main application points I think that I would love to leave us with is we are in a fallen world. And so there are times when we are the fool, and there are times when we are enduring the fool. But if you are the fool, to live a life of folly, to stay on that path of folly, is ultimate destruction. And so I'll leave this quote up here. I won't read it because there's a huge queue in the back. But let's pray. And I was hoping to have more time to talk, but this was a longer section. Hope it was helpful. And again, I think there's much that the teacher invites us in wisdom to chew on, consider, and hopefully learn from. Dear Lord, thank you for your word. Father, I pray that your word would be the only thing that's remembered, Lord, that we would understand you better, that we would love you more, and that we would trust you. Lord, guard our hearts and our thoughts, guard our words, and Lord, help us realize that many good things in our lives, Lord, could be subverted by one foolish decision, one sinful decision. So God, I pray that you would protect us, and through your Holy Spirit, guard our hearts.